Hello, everyone. Hello from New Orleans. My name is Biljana Obradovic. Thanks for tuning in for my book launch of my fifth collection of poems called By Distances. Called by Distances. Here it is. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the book, a little bit about my background, and then read a few poems, and then we'll take a few questions at the end. Um, I'd first like to thank the editor of the Southern Messenger series, Dave Smith, um, and LSU Press, everybody at LSU Press. Dave Smith, my editor and longtime mentor, and I have known each other since 1989 when I was a student at Virginia Commonwealth University getting my MFA in creative writing. And then to his suggestion, I continued my education and got a PhD at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And then 30 years ago, this year, I came to New Orleans, Louisiana, and I've been here since. I'm a full professor at Xavier University of Louisiana, where I've been teaching in one of the first creative writing programs at an HBC. I'm very proud of that. We've had some fabulous students at Xavier. I'm Serbian American. I'm sure some of you are wondering about my name, and a lot of that is in the book. I come from a country that doesn't exist anymore, once called Yugoslavia. And I often go there during the summers. I translate from Serbian often. I've had 7, 8 books of translations published, 2 anthologies, and a collection of essays that I edited by Philip Dacey, who is a formalist poet and a good friend of mine. The first book that I published was called Frozen Embraces in 1997, followed by Le Richemont, part of my thesis that I worked on also with Dave Smith, and that came out a few years later. Then I had another book called Little Disruptions, and the last book was Incognito. So I'm very happy to have this book now. Many of the poems in this book have been written different times in my life. So these are not, some of them are recent, some of them are not so recent. I'm, very happy that my good friend Meta Adamic, a fabulous artist from Slovenia, has contributed this art for the cover. And it's called My Private Diary Blue. Meta and I have studied at Virginia Commonwealth University together years ago. That's when I also met Dave. So thank you, Meta, for that. I'd also like to say that I studied with some amazing other poets in my MFA and my PhD programs, like Margaret Gibson, Gregory Donovan, Marcia Southwick, Greg Kuzma, Hilda Raz, and the past U.S. Poet Laureate Ted Kuzer. Another influence on me was Charles Simic, the Serbian American poet who has recently died, as well as others like Stanley Kunitz, whom I've translated from English into Serbian, and so on. I would like to also thank a few people who have also worked on these poems with me, especially a group of faculty members and staff from Xavier who, some of whom are still at Xavier, some of whom have left, but we still do a workshop together that I run, a multi-genre workshop. And every month we meet on Zoom. And so it's been going on for maybe 15 years. So I really appreciate everything they've done to make these poems the way they are, as well as my good old classmate Tim Skeen, fabulous poet from Fresno, and his wife Pam Weiner, who was one of the editors at Prairie Schooner years ago. Of course, I must thank John Gary, my husband, um, longtime poet and one of the founders of the MFA program at the University of New Orleans. Um, and I'd like to thank my son, Petar Gary, who came up with the name Called by Distances uh, last summer when I was telling him about the book. And so he helped me organize the book. The book is organized in 5 sections, called by the past. So all the sections are called by the past, called by love and death, called by distances, called by names, and called by nature. So that's worked out really well. I think I'm really pleased with how we organized the book. Um, so I would like to read the first poem in the book dedicated to my good friend from VCU, who now lives in Florida, Catherine Nelson Bourne. River Runs Through Me. And, you know, I lived in different parts of ex-Yugoslavia, and this was on the border of uh, Bulgaria, and this particular town that I'm writing about is on the border of Bulgaria and Romania, where my father was a customs officer. He later became a diplomat, and as a result, we moved from place to place. We lived in Greece, where I went to an American school called Pinewood Schools of Thessaloniki, and then I moved to India, where I went to Cathedral and John Connon School, where, by the way, Salman Rushdie went, and others, many very famous people. But this poem is about the connection between New Orleans and my past through the rivers. Rivers run through me. One. In New Orleans, I offer my friend water. I grew up poor, starving, even homeless, she says. We couldn't pay the water bill. Now still thin, she says. You eat a lot later in life, or forget to eat. She gulps the bright water. I tell her I need to lose 20 pounds. Her sister goes on frequent food shopping sprees, afraid of hunger at home. I tell her in the customs house, our home by the Danube across from Bulgaria and Yugoslavia, we had no running water. My mother carried buckets of water 3 flights of stairs to cook, wash our clothes, wash our bodies, to wash away the excrement in our bathroom. We ate a lot of Serbian bean soup, sometimes sour cabbage, with my grandmother's ham, and whole chickens on potatoes. But across from the phosphate factory that made detergent for laundry and agricultural fertilizer, a stinking nightmare, we couldn't afford to eat chicken and potatoes every Sunday. We played at writing on dust on our coffee table each day with the chemical that had entered our old apartment house through the wall cracks. My father, who saw this, would kill us and his employees. As manager of the customs house, demanded the factory give us new apartments and clean water or be sued. They listened. The factory and the river hummed on. My father and mother both died of cancer at age 66. 2. 40 years later, friends drove me to see Prahovo, where we had lived in the middle of nowhere. Its gray, damp walls near the main part of that village. I passed my old school. I didn't remember it at all. Today I recalled the long walks in the snow there and back. Nothing in between except a river and wolves howling. I knocked on our old apartment door to see who was home. Would she know me? No. An old lady who lives there now opened the door. She let me in to look. In her sink, still no running water. Half a century and no one has fixed it. Powder, grit from the same factory dusted her table. She warned me snakes live in the unused backyard. When the old lady asked me to sit down, she offered me preserves she had made and a glass of cold water. I thanked her, but didn't want any, afraid of what she must have borne for years up dirty stairs, like my mother. But through a bedroom window, I could glimpse the blue, beautiful Danube. So I gulped the gray water she gave me, her hand trembling. No wonder rivers run through me. The life I had lived, the Danube then, now the Mississippi. So, yes, the Mississippi is a few blocks from here for those of you who are tuning in from Europe. And in the evenings, I can hear one of the ships that's on the river, its horn. You can hear it all the way to my neighborhood. So that was in the first section of the book called By the Past, kind of remembering the old days going way, way, way back. But then also talking about love and death in the second section, which is very interesting that I combine love and death together. But if you get a chance to read it, I hope you can get a copy. You can see why that's the case. Today, I'm wearing black for a reason. It was my aunt's funeral. She died a few days ago. And this is a poem about mourning, but in this case, my mother, wearing black, 1999. On New Year's Day, I mourn my mother, dead, gone, finished at the beginning, almost a new millennium. Should I wear black clothes for my mother? Show I mourn, black for death, the ground, night, darkness, sadness. All my clothes have to be black. I had promised her to wear them as she had for her mother, her father, for 40 days, 40 nights, up to a year. But in America, you don't see mourners in black clothes without makeup. Anyway, I used to wear black before now, so who will know? Should I wear a black armband or black scarf on my head to show I'm in mourning and wish to be exempted from joy? No one's here to help me with the ritual. Instead, my colleague suggested I see a psychologist, hers. As a new American, I noticed even Roosevelt wore a black armband to mourn his mother. A photo of Sherman shows a black ribbon on him after Lincoln's assassination. Like these famous people, should I wear black for death? I don't know the rules here, or should I go on without? My mother is dead anyway, now around, not around to see if I had paid my respects. But I'm not in Belgrade to visit her grave each day of those 40 days to bring her fresh flowers, to light the wax candles. Here, I must find my own way to mourn. So, I'm a transnational poet, I always say, and I always say I'm Serbian American, even though I'm an American citizen 20 years now. Um, I am a proud American, but I'm also a proud Serb. So it's always a conflicted situation. Um, I'm happy to be both. And so I'm always thinking about, how there are differences between one culture and another. And I guess I'll read this one. This is This is from the fourth section, Called by Names, in which I talk about the problems I've had with the American culture and how people pursue me. In this case, it's how people view my name when they see it. It's dedicated to my nephew Dusan. A hierarchy of names. My nephew says where he lives in Italy, they call non-EU citizens extracomunitario, a pejorative word. In Greece, to Italian tourists, his clients, he introduces himself as Sean O'Brady, not Dusan Obradovic, which is his real name. And they, in turn, think him Irish, a good thing, not a Serb. When the once U.S. poet laureate Charles Simic came to the U.S., he changed his name from Dusan to Charles. He removed the funny mark on the C. At the turn of the 20th century, when a family with my last name came through Ellis Island on their way to Omaha, Nebraska, they changed their name to O apostrophe Bradovic with an H to make it Irish, which must have been what the officers presumed it was among the masses of starving Irish immigrating to America. I didn't want my name to be changed when I became a U.S. citizen, but I often wonder if I should have taken my husband's name and become Billy Ann O'Gary, or take his old name Docherty, Billy Ann O'Docherty, very Scotch-Irish, very American. But I need I needed to keep the O to remember what used to be there, what used to be me before I was urged to assimilate, not to be constantly looked down upon as foreign. In my office drawer, I keep cutouts from envelopes addressed to me with my name misspelled, and now even get excited at the prospect of each new surprise. Obradović with an E, O apostrophe Bradovic, or Biljara, Biljana, Bilzanan, Bitiana. I did not add an H to the end of my last name. Let people struggle. Keep asking how to spell it, how to pronounce it. Perhaps my name will become memorable. One day everyone will know the right spelling and I won't have to do anything. Maybe some will name their children after me. Transform, blend in. That's the last thing I want. So that's what happens when you have a difficult name. I wanted to also read one for my father. My father was a diplomat, and he went on a diplomatic trip to I guess China and then Japan. And I was recently um, grateful that I was invited to visit Japan. So that was really wonderful. He loved Japan and loved New Zealand. So he had these great opportunities. So I'm grateful to my father and mother for, learning English and being able to live in different places around the world. And I always tell my students that this is an amazing thing to do if you can travel somewhere else to see how things are in different places. And I embrace new things always. My father did not like snakes. And another thing I wanted to mention is this particular poem is a villanelle. And even though a lot of my poetry is free verse, most of it is free verse and narrative poetry, there are a few poems here that are formal. So there are a few sonnets, there's some sestinas, and some villanelles, and maybe some others. Maybe you can guess. This is called Pickled Snake in Wine, in memory of my father. We all knew about my father's hatred and fear of snakes He wouldn't even look at a picture of one, let alone at a live one in a zoo or on TV in a nature show. I, too, am terrified of snakes, but not my brother nor my son. Later, my husband, not I, took our son to look at them at the New Orleans Audubon Zoo. But the most extreme example of my father's phobia occurred when he went on a Far East diplomatic mail pickup trip. A colleague who had once lived there asked him to bring back wine with a pickled snake for virility, for better sexual performance. Due to high alcohol content, it's drunk from a shot glass. Dad bought a bottle in China, but couldn't sleep. His hotel room glowed with the snake's presence in his suitcase. After he returned, he showed it to us, then called his friend, pleading him to come and take it away. He refused to drink what the man offered him, especially not after his joke that after drinking the wine, he'd chop up the snake and eat it too. My mother, who knew what a thing fear can be, laughed the hardest. Take it away, my father shouted. Yes, do. My mother sighed. So that's, there's humor in some of these poems, even though some of them can be serious. And so what else can I say? I guess I'll end with this one about nature. Nature is something that I love. My grandparents were both farmers, and I I and my mother had a green thumb. She was always great with flowers, and I am too. Our house right now is filled with plants because we had to bring them in because it's a really cold spell here in New Orleans and the whole of the United States. And so I think my papayas will die now again. Whenever there's a freeze, we can't protect them. This climate here is subtropical, and I can grow them, and I have actual papayas and have made jam from them and sent them to many friends around the country. And so, I just love plants and have a lot of plants and hope to continue doing that in the future. So this is called Waiting for Papayas. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say this, that when I was working on this book with Dave Smith, we started out with two manuscripts. I had two manuscripts of poems, and this book is over 80 pages long. It's pretty long. It's 88 pages. And so both manuscripts had 88 pages. And or around that, and we ended up with the best poems for this book. So I'm grateful again. I repeat, I'm grateful to Dave for working with me on uh, most of these poems and for putting it together. Waiting for papayas. Placed in a pot, the papaya seeds from store-bought fruit grew into a giant tree in just 4 months. We noticed after our brief European trip. The tree hovered over the tomato and basil, blocking the sun from them, its wide leaves like an umbrella shielding the dwarves below. Curious passers-by began to stop to look at it by our driveway in disbelief, as if hungry wolves eager for the fruit to ripen. Like tennis fans, they gaped awaiting each ball to drop straight down the line. A flow of visitors passed by, but the 40 or more papayas took their time from April to December before the frost. Finally, from the ripe papayas, I made papaya jam, designed a label with my son, and gave jars of jam to his teachers, friends, family, and colleagues for Christmas. Everyone loved papaya jam, even wanted to order more. We thought of starting to sell until The winter days grew darker, colder, the skies turned gray. Everyone got sick and sneezed. Concerned about possible frost, I cut the large unripe fruit off to use for stews. Then it snowed for 2 days, and full of 40 fruits, the tree froze. We cut the tree down, threw the rest of the football like fruit into the trash. How could I have grown such a huge papaya tree from a seed? If only all the fruit could have ripened. If only all the fruit could have ripened before the frost, so abundant it was, we could share it with our neighbor who'd been grateful for its shade on her front porch. And now we all lament how so much came from so little. So, of course, some of the poems in this book are about natural disasters like Katrina, um, and then other things that have happened, floods in Europe, and so on. So this is not the only thing that's going on. So it's good and bad. Nature has its ways um, in the book. Um, it's been wonderful being with you today. I hope I can get you to get a copy of this book that I'm very proud of. We'll take a few questions now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Biljana, for that fabulous presentation. And thank you to everyone in the chat for tuning in today. Just a reminder that if you have a question for Biljana, just put it in the chat and we will ask her. If you didn't know, we meet up on Zoom and we live stream this event on Facebook. And so we were talking earlier about how weird it is that Biljana can't really see who's in the audience. So I wanted to kind of spread the love here and say we had some great comments from Julie Kane, from Pam Yushuk, from Kelly Frankenberg, from Snasia, from Gina Ferrara, from Daniel Saldaji Lee, from Catherine Nelson Bourne, from Brad Rashar, from Rashad Chowdhury. And so thank you all for commenting and for being here. And I did want to mention a comment from Pam, who said, "A river runs through me" is a marvelous poem, the imagery vivid and moving. So
Thank you.
that's,
Thank you.
I think you needed that. So I wanted to, to
Thank
share
you,
that here.
everyone
So
coming,
yeah.
especially Amit, who came all the way from India. Must be in India. So he's a fabulous novelist who was another classmate of mine from Cathedral in Bombay.
I'm going to start actually with a question from Rashid. And he asks if you write in Serbian as well or only in English. And if it's the latter, what makes English your preferred medium?
Well, I only write in English, but I do use some Serbian words that cannot be translated. That's why I'm transnational. Culture cannot be translated, of course, and so there's always a sort of they're in me. So it's been a long time since I've lived there. I only lived there till the age of 9. And then when I was in college, from let's say 19 to from 1980, let's say, to 1988, that was it. So altogether 17 years. The rest of the time I was abroad. The language is alive. Language changes, and so it's not the same. The language has changed so much since 1980 when I came to the United States. Um, but I do read Serbian, and I translate into Serbian and into English. What has become easier for me is to translate into English, which is quite difficult for most Serbs to do. Um, and and it's easier to translate into Serbian, but that's much harder for me now. And I need help with, the writers that I'm translating.
I guess I wanted to talk about distance a little bit. And um, I was thinking actually from some of the comments here, people like to tell where they're from. So we have Pam that's tuning in from Tucson. We have Rashid that's tuning in from Toronto. Is that right? From Toronto. Um, Obviously, your book kind of spans place and time, from Yugoslavia, which, as you mentioned, is no longer a country, to Greece, to Italy, to India. Um, I guess I was wondering, does place show up in the collection kind of in different ways? I mean, are some places harder to write about than others?
Um, Again, they're part of me, and whenever they show up in my head, something is triggered in my head. I write about them. I don't think it's harder, but it's different because some are further away in my mind, you know. Like India, I never went back to India, and so that's maybe more difficult for me to write. I'd love to go back to India, but that has never happened. Maybe one day, but I go back to Greece. I've gone to Greece several times, and go to Yugoslavia, ex-Yugoslavia, different parts of ex-Yugoslavia a lot. Um, and I go to Tucson. I'm coming in 2 weeks, Pam, because my mother-in-law is turning 100, which is fabulous. So very excited about that. It's part of who I am. I enjoy I travel all the time. Go to conferences. I've gone to conferences all over the world and always find a way to put it in my poems.
All right, we got a couple more comments that I wanted to share. We have a comment from Pamela Weiner who says, enjoyed the reading, love the book from Pam and Tim.
Thank you.
We
Thank
also
you.
had a comment from Ron Smith, but I wanted to go to Kelly Frankenberg, who is writing from Minneapolis, and she wants to know, are you compelled to illustrate any of your poems with your art, or do you keep your poetry separate?
Aha. Um, well, no, I don't keep my poetry separate. If I was gonna say that I'm very grateful to Meta for this cover, but several of my previous covers have been my paintings. So I have Kelly is an artist, a wonderful artist, and I saw I saw her painting this summer, and so I'm very interested in. I've always I was talking to my husband the other day, and I said, "Oh, um, I wish I had been a painter." I regret that, and I just sold 3 paintings, which is amazing. I exhibited them at this exhibit of miniatures in New Orleans, and so that was kind of interesting. So I hope to do more, but to illustrate my I don't know if that could work. I teach a class about writing about art uh, to my students that I developed myself. And so ekphrastic poetry is something that I do. And I'm always interested in art, in artists, and, have, for example, gone to southern France to um, looked at where Van Gogh lived for a while and stayed in Arles and kind of followed his footsteps of his paintings. There's a poem there about that trip. So yeah, art always appears in my writing.
I got a couple more comments here that I wanted to share. First from Pam Ushak, who says, but your poetry translates your culture beautifully. And I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. And then one from Pamela, who says, the book as a whole is like a guided imagery tour for someone like me who has not traveled myself internationally. It's so great when you can feel like you're somewhere else. I mean, that's the beauty, I think, of great art. And then we'd had a congrats from Galatea. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
Thank you, Galatea Dimitriou.
Right.
Greek,
So
yes.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned to me that some of these poems are very old. So I'm sort of curious, how is it sort of revisiting them? How is it organizing them? Did they have new life? What was it like?
Yes, some of them are, from my graduate school days that, I don't abandon poems. They're still there somewhere in a drawer and waiting to be worked on. I love revising. I teach my
Hmm.
students to revise. It's something that we all should do more of. And I'm never happy with anything. And it's constant, whether it's just like one comma or a letter needs to be capitalized. Well, there's a poem here that I that's about Lincoln, Nebraska that ends this book, Yellow Water Lily. There's another one there, but that one's kind of interesting, and so it was actually a writing exercise with my students. I in at University of Nebraska Lincoln. I took my students to this garden, this beautiful garden, and we looked at the plants and we're just enjoying being outside, writing outside, which I think a lot of people should do. Just go out in the nature. And I wanted to end, the book with that because I don't know, nature is something that we should respect more, that we should care for more, and so that was interesting that, I ended the book with this poem. I didn't expect that that would be the last poem, but it was difficult to kind of go back and I didn't I remembered kind of what I did, how I wrote this poem, but not everything, so it's a new poem that's kind of recreated from the old.
Yeah, it's interesting because in that way it's almost like a journal entry or something because it's a capsule
Right.
in time
It
that
is.
you really can't access any other way, right?
No, no,
Uh,
no.
I have
It
wanted to go ahead, sorry.
it's what's wonderful about being a writer is exactly that. There are two things that I care about. I tell my students always, I write to discover. Writing is a process of discovery. I write to find out what I'm, feeling, what I'm experiencing, because I often don't know until I write it down. But it's exactly what you're saying. I write because I want to remember, because if we don't write it down, my memory is terrible. But I've captured the moment with the poems, and they're there. The moment is there.
Ron Smith in the chat wisely shared a quote from the French poet and essayist Paul Valéry, which is, "A poem is never finished, it is simply abandoned."
Yep, yep, yep,
Isn't
yep.
that true? I
Yes.
wanted to share this comment from Alan Golding in the chat. Alan says, "Hi, I
Hi,
particularly
Alan.
enjoyed the name poem. I wasn't sure if the title is Call My Name or Called by Name, but both seem relevant to our present moment, the connections of naming to exclusion, oppression, marginalization, and the use of people's names against them." I thought that was a great comment.
Yeah, it's a hierarchy of names. That's what
Um,
it's called. Yeah.
Hierarchy of
Yeah,
names.
yeah, so yeah, yeah, there are several poems here about that. And some of them are not about me, Some of them are about other people, things, I'm obsessed with small stories, newspaper fillers, things like that. Um, that you don't really notice, but then they become big news, and details. And and so this was "You Ugly" is that poem from Times Picayune, when a worker was fired for giving a passenger a mean note. And I'm not going to read the whole poem. You guys can read it, but the note was, this is at the airport. I mean, I can't imagine somebody handing this to you. The note was "You Ugly." awful, just awful. I mean, what people will do, it was a TSA person, what people will do to others, you know. Yes, um, it's that kind of a moment right now, and we have to care for each other very much.
I wanted to share a couple comments here in the chat from Pam, who first said that Joy Harjo said that poetry is memory alive. That's a
Yes.
gorgeous quote. Um, she also shared that I was particularly taken by the name poem because my name has been the subject of controversy and prejudice often in my life.
Yeah.
Um, I also can relate to that, Pam. Um, I um I wanted to ask you a question from Ron Smith, and then I have two more questions before we wrap up, unless anyone else in the chat has something. But Ron asks if you ever publish found poems.
Which poems?
Found poems. Those
Oh,
are, remind me, Ron, what those are. Those are like,
I'll explain. I'll
okay,
explain. Okay, so I've written found poems. I don't know if I've actually published one, but these are poems that are not really poems. They exist as something else. But I've received an email from somebody that was really interesting and have, you know, taken it and created a poem out of it. Um, I wrote a poem about, I haven't published, I don't think I've published that, but I found that a back in the day, 1999, my then partner, now husband, and I went to China to a conference, a pound conference. Ron will know what I'm talking about because we go to these together. Um, and the in the hotel we were staying in, they had in quote unquote English directions on how to dial long distance. This was before, you know, we had WhatsApp and whatnot nowadays that we could communicate. You'd have to like dial long distance and call whoever you wanted to call abroad. Well, it was in English, but it was translated from Chinese and didn't make any sense whatsoever. And so I have a poem that, you know, that's very interesting, that's in this, I don't know, Chinese English, I guess. And that would be something. But I have a poem which I published from things that my students have written, which are kind of misspelled words that become something else,
hmm.
and so they don't understand that it's really means something completely different. And so yeah, have some of those.
Ron
I
says,
published a poem with those. Yeah.
Ron says it's fun to break the prose of such quotations into meaningful lines.
All
I
right.
actually, I had a question about form too. You called this collection biographical poetry, and at least maybe I think that you said that. Did you say that? No, you
No,
didn't say that. Okay.
no, no,
I
no.
must have totally I must have totally um put those words in. But I want to talk about this anyway. I feel like there's elements of biography. Is that fair to say, right? In this collection? Or is it
Yes. Well, you know, a lot of things are about me. Yeah, you know, they are, but there are other things that are not. There are poems that are about other people. Uh, Maybe they relate to me, but they're about events that I have experienced or have um, you know, read about or thought about, and so on. Yeah. So not all of them, but a lot of the poems are about my life and what has happened and so on. Yeah.
I was just interested in like sort of the poetic form and how like poetry might lend itself in some ways to help you tell stories in a way or it doesn't, or I wonder this about sometimes for people do you write like this in as a poem because you're a poet or do you write this as a poem because this is how it's coming out. Does that make sense?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm capturing certain things about um, you know, I'm actually writing a memoir. I've been writing it since after Katrina, and it's completely different writing than this. So a poem is a whole, it has a whereas prose is something very, very different. Maybe some of my poems are prosy, but they're you know full of imagery.
Hmm.
They have a lot of figures of speech. They are divided in such a way that they it's very important to me. uh, the line breaks are very important to me. So there are things that matter in poetry that they're very different in prose. And I'm struggling. I've been writing it, as I said, since Katrina, 20 years now. And I've changed what I'm doing in my memoir completely. But it's very different writing than this. It's very, very difficult. One thing that Dave has taught me is endings. I've always worked hard on my endings and ending on some kind of an image or some kind of a thought. And um, that that kind of concludes the poem. It's not easy to do. It's You have to kind of stop somewhere, and where are you going to stop? So yeah, I the craft is you have to always work on your craft. It's hard. Um, some poems have um, my own kind of created pattern or form waiting for him. For example, somebody asked me a few years back in an interview, is this some kind of a form? It looks like this, right? So
Hmm.
they're indented lines, but it's something that I do. I don't know if others do that, but it's something that I do. So it's my thing. And I don't know where that came from. It's just something that I've been doing for a while. So there's several poems like that.
I was yeah, I think Pam in the chat says that sometimes the poem itself dictates the form. So I like that. I like that idea here.
Of
And
course, yeah.
Julie Kane is mentioning the Volta poem, which I don't know, but I'm sure that you
Oh
know what she's
yeah.
talking about.
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
the poem. Yeah.
I wanted to read this question from Snasia in the chat. And again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. Um, and then I wanted to ask you one more question for today. So Snasia asks, do you remember when you were called to read your poems encore? That was 28 years ago in Toronto. Do you find that nowadays are different for poets and their poetry?
Huh. Well, yes, hello, Snezhina. Hello, Toronto. It must be really cold there, but it's cold here, so I can imagine how cold it is in
Right?
Canada. Thank you for coming. Yeah, I remember very well. Um, and thank you for inviting me to do a reading there in Toronto. It was a wonderful experience, and yes, it was. I don't remember, but you reminded me that somebody wanted some more poems. I've had different experiences doing readings, and I remember later on in Cleveland, somebody asked me, like, why are my poems so depressing? Do I have any happy poems? And I said, well, I've rarely written poems when I'm happy. I don't think a lot of writers write when they're happy. They're just enjoying that minute of happiness because the rest of the time is just, look what's happening is rather depressing. And so why we write is because we're trying to understand our present. So no, I don't think things have changed. What's changed is that people are not reading, and that's very sad. They're obsessed with this thing. my students are obsessed with their phones, and so now we're policing them, not allowing them to have their phones in the classroom, and using the old-fashioned writing utensil that people have forgotten in notebooks. Yeah, I have to force my students to read, and so it has changed a lot in that respect. But poetry is not going to die. It's going to live on, and other writing, and people are going to be reading. What's really frightening is, of course, AI, and that's why I'm making my students write by hand. Um, but I don't know. I don't know where we're going with this, and stealing our work, it's just awful. It's an awful thing that's going on. And so we'll see. We'll see if we survive this. But I think, people will always be reading poetry and writing it, and so, as will I.
I want to read two more comments to you and do a closing question. First, Rashid in the chat has informed us that it's -9 degrees Celsius or 15 degrees Fahrenheit in Toronto right now.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, it's cold here, but it's not that cold.
No, no, no. It's yeah, and that's Celsius, right? Oh my
Yeah,
God, that is that even more here? It's 48 degrees in New Orleans,
and
and
that's
I don't know.
15 there.
Yeah, so I don't know what that is. It's above 0 Celsius, definitely.
Um,
51.
Pam also said, we also write to survive what's happening, and I think that's really true.
Exactly. Yeah. I just want to say this, that it's been very difficult living in this country since I've come here for many reasons. For me, it has been because I lived through a civil war far away, in my country. I came here in 88, 91, the war started. I couldn't go home for 4 years because of the war. My parents then died in 1999, and both of them within 6 months during the bombing of Belgrade. My father was hospitalized and died in the hospital, not because of the bombing, but his hospital was bombed. Um, and then in '03, our son was born, which was, a big event for us, a wonderful event. But then in 2005, we lost our house. We couldn't live in our house for a year, you know, and then COVID came. We couldn't leave our house, and now this. So a lot of traumatic things have happened in the last 30 years. Well, actually, I've been here almost 40 years in the United States, 38 years, but it's just very, very traumatic. So yeah, so we write to survive, exactly.
I Yeah, my last question is sort of related to that, and I wanted to ask you about what you're working on. You mentioned your memoir, and I wanted to know if you wanted to tell us a little bit more about that or anything else that is
Yeah,
in
I'm
process.
I'm yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I'm working on a for a while I decided to I worked on translations for maybe 8, 10 years, this anthology that I did of 71 poets with Dubravka Đurić, the Serbian poet. Took me 4 years to complete. It was a long for us to complete. It was a long, long time, and then I did two books of translations into English after that. And I said, that's it for a while. I have to stop translating. I have to work on my own poems because my poetry is kind of put by the wayside. And not that I haven't been writing. I have like piles of poems waiting to be worked on, to be revised. And so, so here is this book because I quit translating. But, translation is in me. And so I have another project that I'm working on of 8 Serbian poets into English. and I'm in the process of collecting these poems. And it won't be very long, maybe 60 pages, bilingually, 120. So that won't take a long time. But I'm also, of course, working on new poems all the time, and with my writing group, we're meeting once a month. We meet during the break, we meet during the summer, and some of them are writing prose. I workshop my oh, I wanted to talk about the memoir a little bit. I workshop poems and I workshop chapters from this memoir. Initially, I started writing it like an autobiography from beginning to the end, kind of my life. Not the end, but to the present. And then I stopped. I wasn't happy with it. And now I'm writing these 6, 7 page kind of um, stories about events that have happened in my life. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. So that's what I'm doing. And it's going to take me a while. Maybe it won't be just one book. Maybe it'll be 2 books or 3 books, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And so thank you.
Well,
Thank you so much, Corey.
yes, I wanted to sincerely thank you, Biljana, for being with us, and also thank everyone in the audience.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.